Welcome to Global Faith, to a special webinar, webcast from the heart of Omaha in a non-disclosed location. I'm board member Rob Rohrbough. If this is your first meeting, your first special meeting for sure, we are ambassadors of the gospel of Jesus Christ. We're advocates for the victims of Islam, and we're champions for the United States Constitution. You're joining tonight. We have a special guest. His name is Sam Rohrer. He is a former member of the Pennsylvania House of Representatives for 18 years. He was motivated to pursue a career in religious and political endeavors by his mother to choose two biblical characters, and he chose to follow Joseph and Daniel. He is currently president of the American Pastors Network, and in that capacity, we would like him to do the opening prayer, and we'll follow that by the Pledge of Allegiance.
All right, well, thank you very much. Welcome to all in the program today, and this following prayer as we start this today. Our Heavenly Father, Lord, we're thankful to you that you are a sovereign God who is over all. You look down on the affairs of men, as Ben Franklin said here outside Philadelphia, and said, "Can rise without your help." And no, we know, Lord, it can't. And that the reason that we're here is because you aided and you up this nation, blessed the efforts of many people, and a very long ago, and brought us to this point. And now face extraordinary challenges. Challenges to the very foundation of government itself. But we know that you provide for us the answers to all questions, all issues of life. You've given all that we need if we but choose to pursue and seek the knowledge and the truth that you provided in your, and then discernment and wisdom to apply it to the issues of the day. Lord, in these days of confusion and great deception, which is so obvious, it is really, Lord, only your truth that is able to pierce that darkness and to set free those who are in bondage to a rejection of who you are. So we would ask that you would guide in this time together this evening. May the items brought all of us as we attempt to sharpen each other, as we're told in Proverbs, iron sharpens iron. We pray that that would happen tonight. We pray in Jesus' name, amen.
Thank you. Thank you, Sam Rohrer. Please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I think we're going to see a flag shortly. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Then I'm sitting here with Dr. Mark Christian. And Dr. Christian, would you have a couple of words and maybe some questions for Sam?
You know, first I want to start by thanking Honorable Sam Rohrer for joining us today and share his wisdom, and thanks for the great prayer that you shared with us. This is rather a very important times and very interesting times in our nation and actually in history as well. And I want to get started by actually reminding everybody by our last event that we had, just a little bit over a week ago, where we discussed the reasons and the problems that we seem like to be the real problem behind the election of 2020 and so forth. And I highlighted big time what took place in Pennsylvania. Now, I'm sometimes a little bit dramatic and talk about, this nation really was kind of consolidated and started in Pennsylvania when the Constitution was ratified and put together. And then I look at the Act 77 and so forth as it might be something that will kind of endanger the American experiment altogether. And the reason that I'm, asked Honorable Sam to join us today is to explain what really took place in the election, the Act 77, Act 12, how this has been able to be passed, what are the circumstances that took place, how they were able to get it into the Supreme Court later on, why nobody challenged it for 180 days. Those are the things that I shared last time, and many people have lots of questions about how is that done and so forth. And actually, I'm not over here to just to discuss what took place in the 2020 election, but we are looking forward at how things are going to look like in 2024 and afterwards. And we have a serious problem that we have some kind of bills that is presented into the House of Representatives and also is going to be in the Senate that will change the election for good. So with all of this, I want to turn it on to Sam. And maybe the very first question is, you have spent 18 years in the House of Representatives in Pennsylvania. You are very well aware of the ins and outs and how the politics takes place in your state, and you are very much involved as well with everything going on. So can you give us a little bit of understanding of how the Act 77 was actually passed, introduced and passed, in 2019?
Well, Mark, I don't have a simple answer for how something like Act 77 could pass, but I can tell you the process that it went through. Because ultimately, and I don't know whether those who are on the webinar have ever been in an office for, and where anybody has actually cast a vote, but the one most single thing, the most important thing that a person in office ever does is cast a vote. And one thing an observer of a political sense knows, and those in office, when a person gets into office, they soon find out that they don't mean anything. The only them that's important in the process is the vote they cast. So the process has a way of buying, bribing, threatening, a whole host of things in order to get that vote. So with that being said, funny things happen when you get in office, and very seldom in my 18 years, very seldom, almost, do I remember any major vote ever being cast on anything that was purely of the most constitutional thing that we can do, or this is the most moral thing that we can do, this is the most right thing that we can do. Oh, some of those arguments would come up on the floor in debate, but at the end of the day, every bill that went through of any significance was a policy that had inside and outside influence, where your leadership, a small group on the House and the Senate side, and most often in agreement with the governor, regardless of the party he was with. There was some kind of agreement that went through because they all want to look like winners. And so when that happened, then everything was to bear to force things through and so forth. Now, all that being said, Act 77 was actually introduced into the Pennsylvania Assembly. It was a Democrat bill. The Republican leadership, because it dealt with voting and so forth, well, you know what? Great opportunity to take and make some changes in it. And they did not want to give political credit to the Democrat side, so they made some changes to it, which they thought would be a problem, a poison pill, but it ended up that everybody liked it, and now they became these of it.
How they would like such a bill.
So now what are you going to do? Huh?
You say that.
Yeah, I mean, they thought.
What are the things? Yeah, what are the things that the Republicans thought that this is good in the bill? If anybody look at the bill and it's right there, it says it's overhauling election system in Pennsylvania, something that have never been done before. So I just want to understand how the Republican were able to pass something like this. And the reason I'm saying that is because today, in this climate we live in, people need to be aware of how the bills is going to pass as well in different states. Here is a sequence of events, and you can correct me, and this is why I want people to follow what we're talking about. So in 2019, of October 2019, this is 4 months before anybody ever heard about COVID-19 and the virus and so forth. And this is a little bit over than a year before the election of 2020. A bill of this kind of magnitude had to pass while everybody was very busy with the first impeachment of Donald Trump. Passing a bill with this magnitude, with big changes like this, especially with very leniency into registration and sending mail-in ballots unsolicited and many other things like that. All of that has to pass without the Republican contesting it, without anybody kind of raising awareness about what's going on. Why something like this has to happen? This is the question.
Well, I don't know. Here's what the majority leader, who is now our speaker, an individual I know, he said after it was passed, this bill was not to benefit one party or the other, or any one candidate or a single election. It was developed over a multi-year period with input of people from different backgrounds in regions of Pennsylvania. And get this, it serves to preserve the integrity of every election and lift the voice of every voter in the Commonwealth. Now, to think those who voted for this was that it was in every way good. We were going to respond to voters by things more convenient, and it positioned in that way. That was by the Republican majority leader, who's now our speaker. Now, here is a quote by one of the senators who was a Democrat, who I know, and she's not at all conservative. She said, "This law will bring polling to the people. It is closer to a modern democracy. No excuses, no excuses." And Governor Wolf, who is one of the worst governors we've ever had in Pennsylvania, most unconstitutional, he said, "The bill makes voting more convenient and more secure millions of Pennsylvanians, and it continues to modernize our elections." So you drift. Anytime a bill is passed, there are talking points. These were the common talking points. More convenient. We're going to bring poll to the people. And as a result of it, there were two primary things that were done in that bill. One, the provision for mail-in ballots, which obviously we know about. And the other was $90 million in bond money that was given to the governor that was also a part of new electronic voting machine. Wow, wow, wow. Interesting. Now, in 19, this was October. And then COVID hits the beginning of the year. Now that gets into another story, and there's some things beyond that.
Before I move forward,
here's the issue. Here's the issue. Let me put there one question, one point here. Absent in this discussion was, what does the Pennsylvania Constitution say? Now, the legislature, by the Pennsylvania Constitution, has the ability to pass law governing voting. Article 11 of the Pennsylvania Constitution talks about it. Now, here's where the problem occurred. The bill was unconstitutional when they passed it. That was a fundamental issue. It shouldn't have never gotten out. The Pennsylvania Constitution, Article 7, Section 14, deals with absentee voting. Okay, now here's what it says. The legislature, and you can see how careful to deep, apparent, attention to detail is so. The legislature, this is the Constitution, shall by law provide a manner in which and the time and the place at which qualified electors who may on, and then here's the key, on the occurrence of any election, specific time and place, if they be absent from the state or county of their residence because of their duties, occupation, or business requires them to be somewhere else, or they cannot, and I'm going to paraphrase here, unable to attend because of illness or physical disability, or on an observance of a religious holiday. Okay, that's it. That's the Constitution. It doesn't say anything about bringing a polling place to a voter. It doesn't say anything about giving an opportunity to vote to people other than the specific things that are stated in the Constitution. They are absent from the state. They are sick. They are disabled, or there is some kind of a conflict with a religious holiday on which the vote take place. That's it.
One of the key things.
The Pennsylvania. So anyway, so you see what the problem is. The legislature says we want to appeal to the way people feel. We want to make them feel more convenient. We want to appear nice to them. The Constitution does not provide for those things. There is some duty, Mark, for a person who votes. And the heart of the issue, and this filed by one of our congressmen from Western Pennsylvania that did go to the Supreme Court. And I thought for sure that case would have been heard by the Supreme Court because it was fixated strictly on the matter of constitutional provision, and because the legislature opened the door, because as I can read and talk to them, they wanted to appear more friendly to the people. They opened the door, the devil walked in.
For the people, in a simple way, the biggest problem I see with this bill is few things, actually. Number one is the mail-in ballots that they are sending for people who have never been registered before, and sending a registration card hand in hand with the mail-in ballots without any kind of verification or ID or any kind of somebody to sign on it or anything. That is a big flaw, because there is no way you can guarantee who is receiving this mail-in ballot and who is sending it back. This is number one. Number two is how on earth they were able to get this bill, to challenge it in the Supreme Court, and to get the stamp of the Supreme Court of Pennsylvania on it. This is a big question, because that led to many things that we have faced again into 2020. And I explained that in details in the last session. But how did we were able to get it into the Supreme Court is a good question that people, I think, would love to know, if you have any idea about how did they get it to the Supreme Court of Pennsylvania.
And say this, thinking of some of the members of the General Assembly. Who did raise that this was not constitutional. Constitution. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Can now.
Because I was missing a lot of what you were saying. You froze for about 10 seconds. Are you still okay?
Yeah, I'm right here. You can go ahead. You can, if you understood my, if you heard my question, then go ahead.
Many of the legislators raised questions about the constitutionality and said, well, by statute, actually write into and alter what the Constitution says. And they said, well, it's so important that we get this through before the year.
Why is it freezing?
And to the people, so that the people can vote on this and change the Constitution. But then came 2020. And into 2020, then the governor steps in and suspends the law under emergency powers. And then we know all of the discussion of mail-in ballots as being necessary because people are so dangerously, they're going to harm themselves and pass the virus along. We better push the mail-in ballot. Some of the members who voted for it thought they would make it to the point where the Constitution could be changed before the provision would actually be put into place. But the governor is able to seize, and the court then refer to the fact that the legislature had passed it. And now you've got the legislators and the Republicans themselves in trouble because they passed it unconstitutionally. You can't pass a statute for change until the Constitution is changed first. You have to go Constitution, and then you go your statute. They got it out of order, and the government out of order. Now, what happened beyond that? I have to bring up another point. The court did not make a ruling. The court in Pennsylvania, the Pennsylvania Supreme Court, is an activist court. They are known as an activist court. They don't mind making from the bench, never have. And I will say this as it relates to vote, it has been believed for a long time, and I'm one of them, that the makeup of the Pennsylvania Supreme Court actually was aided and abetted by fraudulent votes that came out of Philadelphia in previous elections, which always happens to on statewide election at the last minute come up with 150,000 votes out of nowhere, late in the process, and just enough to flip an election. They flipped election after election in Pennsylvania, and the Supreme Court leaders are there, I believe, in large part because of that. Now, that being said, the governor seized the opportunity of COVID like most governors did, declared an emergency, kept it open 90 days. The law was supposed to say, the law said the governor could not keep open emergency more than 90 days. The legislature was telling the governor through the beginning of the year, you cannot do what you're doing. You've got to stop. According to law, the legislature issued a concurrent resolution from the House and the Senate instructing the governor to stop the process of the emergency and to cease and desist. The governor told a hike. This was around June of last year. The governor basically said, no, I'm not listening to you. He went to the Supreme Court, the same Supreme Court that is activist. He appealed to the Supreme Court that there were reasons for him because of COVID. Mentioned voting, a lot of these things were involved, and said to the Supreme Court, I'm asking you to make an emergency ruling to support me over top of the legislature. The Pennsylvania Supreme Court entered into what is known as King's Bench authority. Hardly that ever happened, goes all the way, but they on their own assumed total authority, total governmental authority. They ruled with the governor, and they told the legislature to cease and desist, and that their actions were void, null and void, which is like dropping an atomic bomb from a judicial legislature. They gutted the legislature.
That's
when that happened. Now the legislature is sitting there basically neutered. When they went and then began to argue with the Supreme Court on their decisions about the voting and dates and deadlines, the legislature had their authority. They would not take it back. And I told them in the middle of last year, if you do not reclaim the authority, they could have done it by a resolution. This court is going to come back and assault this legislature again. And the vote, the timing, the date, and the mail-in, already telegraphed by the court, all citing the statute passed by the legislature. I said, without you dealing with it, this is to come back and haunt you and the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania, maybe the entire country. And of course, now we're looking back and we know, in fact, that it did. So, and
This is-
it's so
See, the
that's how
problem.
it was involved.
Yeah, it seems very interesting how the law and how all the things that followed after that is exactly fitting with COVID and how COVID is going to affect the whole country. And you know what you're saying is very dangerous and very important. It's not only they neuter the legislation, the body in Pennsylvania, but they barred the whole court system in the United States from challenging the mail-in ballots, because one Supreme Court was able to decide on it, and it's very hard for any lower court to take it, not only in the state of Pennsylvania, but other states. And the thing is, I don't know why the mainstream media and the politicians in the country are not talking about this when they are challenged by why every case of Donald Trump has been thrown out of court. He couldn't get it into the court because the Supreme Court of Pennsylvania decided on it. The only court that can take the case is the Supreme Court of the United States of America. And what you just explained, how this happened, is very interesting, and it is very devious in many ways. And I don't know why people are not raising awareness about this.
I don't know either, because here in Pennsylvania, our Secretary of State, our Attorney General, our governor, and our Pennsylvania court had all collaborated together. If you recall, it was our Attorney General that said and laughed at the president and said, we got this all factored out. When it's all said and done, you lost.
Yes.
Well, that got some attention, kind of like, how in the world do you know? How in the world do you know that when the votes are counted, that he is going to lose and that you're going to win? Snarky, arrogant. But that goes to the heart that this was not accidental. They're absolutely, all of that says collusion. It's not just confidence. There's a collusion in the process. The Attorney General said, I will not look at what you bring before me. The Supreme Court said, actually, a lot of people don't know this. There was an appeal made to the Commonwealth Court of Pennsylvania, the lower court. The lower court ruled, and it's a conservative court. Put this way, it's a constitutional court. They ruled that yes, in fact, they ruled in fact that what the Supreme Court had ruled, and the charges raised from the ground that the dates could not be changed or extended at will. They said absolutely that is wrong. Supreme Court stepped in on top of them. They actually had granted. I expected it to happen. I know the lead judge on the Commonwealth Court. She's a fine woman, and she knew. And they had granted. I think that was on a Wednesday. She had granted an expedited hearing to allow evidence to be presented on the Friday of that week. This was right close into the election. And I thought this is the perfect opportunity because they will do it. The Supreme Court stepped in again on top of them and pulled it from them and then ruled that they would not consider it. This kind of thing is without a doubt. It's to say that it's not constitutional would be an understatement. To say that it would be closer to treason is probably not an overstatement. Absolutely, these kinds of things are absolutely violations of constitutional oath. And I told our legislators that basis, that and our Supreme Court stepping into King's Bench authority when they had no right to do so and collaborating with the governor were based for actions of impeachment against the Supreme Court justices. And our leaders going to do it. But constitutionally, and this is one point, I mean, we're not into the answer stage, what do you do for solutions? But boy, I tell you, if the Constitution is what guides us, and the oath that every person who takes, whether they're in the judicial branch, executive branch, or legislative branch, if they take that oath, that must reign supreme. So you can't pass statute and top the Constitution. The governor not make law if he is legislative branch from the executive branch, and neither can the court. Any of those actions become violations of the Constitution. The constitutional remedy is for the legislature to put manners on those wayward officials, and that's called impeachment. See happening in Washington right now is not in fulfillment of the Constitution. That's a mockery of the Constitution for a lot of reasons. But the failure of the legislatures across this state, across this country, and in Washington to actually use the impeachment process, the purpose for which it was designed, have made them complicit with the very violations of the Constitution that we are now seeing. I don't think, Mark, as we talk about this, that you can look at where we are in this nation right now and say it is only because that you had a judicial branch that were activists. You can't say that it was only a few presidents here and there, or a few governors here or there in the executive branch that exceeded their authority. It's a combination of commission, often by judges and by executive branch, and it's a lot of omission by the legislature for failing to do what they're supposed to do constitutionally. That check and balance is in the system is what all has to be maintained. And if one or more do not maintain that balance according to their constitutional oath, you will have collusion. And collusion is what we now see. And the result of you lose your freedom, you lose your foundation for law, and ultimately the citizens lose their ability to appeal. And that's what we mean in this whole thing with the election.
Yes, and here
is and requested and demanded hearings have not gotten it. That's the reason. That's where it goes.
And here you are raising a very good point. You know, many of the United States elected officials from the Republican Party, whether they are in the House or in the Senate, you know, they should have understood and at least now understand what is going on and what happened in Pennsylvania and what happened with the mail-in ballots on the broad scale in the whole country and how that changed the outcome of the election. And it's not, and they continue talking about the machines and so forth, which is a secondary to the main thing of the legislation that changed the election. Why till today they are not talking about that whatsoever, and they moving forward and approving everything that's going on? You said that this is complicit. I think either they are utterly ignorant about what's going on in the country. If people like us sitting today talking about this, and we know what happened in the country, and the elected officials on the highest level in the country, you know, from the top down, all of them are not talking about this issue, it's a serious matter. And what bothers me the most is this, that the Democratic Party also is pushing a bill in the House today to implement what took place in Pennsylvania on the broad scale of the whole country under the H.R. 1, which is called For the People Act. And if I look at it, it seems like it's the same language. It is For the People Act. It's similar to the statements that came out from the representative in Pennsylvania. It is going to be great. It is going to be awesome. We're using simpler words. You know, this is the best things that will ever happen in the election. While it is exactly the opposite of this, and it will take the vote away from the people and give it to a group of people that are going to be able to create phantom votes and go to people that are not eligible to vote or whatever they're going to do. A lot of violation, a lot of changes. So my question to you is, for make it easy and simple to people, did this, how did this affect, I think it's a redundancy, but in your opinion, how did this Act 77 and Act 12 and all the shenanigans that took place, how did that affect the outcome of the election in 2020 in the state of Pennsylvania?
Well, Mark, it is what opened the door for the abuse and for the corruption. That's what we've just been talking about. The legislature opened the door in an unconstitutional way. They had no authority to change and do what they did by statute. The Constitution would have had to have been changed first. They did not. It opened the door into that, and whether, you know, and I'm not gonna, I don't know.
Yeah.
I mean, it almost seems like, wow, October of 2019, just a couple of months before the election, that was not accidental. But, you know, here comes COVID. Here's the excuse to suspend laws, starting in Washington, extended across the state, all of the country, and everybody all of a sudden gets on board buying into the mail-in ballots. Not everybody. You and we were opposing. Many were saying this is a fraudulent action. President Trump at that point was saying this is a problem.
Open the door.
It was a problem to anybody who had talked about it.
Open the door.
Yeah, it opened the door.
Open the door for phantom votes and a whole bunch of fraud. I bet lots of people have lots of questions. Do you have questions, Rob, and from what you're saying tonight? Because I am really upset. I'm really angry and mad. I'm mad about what happened in Pennsylvania. I'm mad about what happened in the country. I am mad at the elected officials today. So what do you think?
I'm not sure if this has already been answered, but it occurred to me as you were describing the process, Sam, that the legislature had an opportunity to correct what happened, but they did not do it. Is that a lack of will? Is it a lack of knowledge of how the system works and what their duty is? Or is there something else that we're not seeing here?
And that's called restore the law. Back in August 13th of last year, I, in behalf of a lot of pastors, we signed this and we sent a letter to the legislators, to the justices, to the governor, on the fact that what was happening in Pennsylvania and across the country by governors under COVID, under all of the things that were happening, distancing, masking, not going to church, all these kind of things, was actually without law. The governor is making these changes, not the legislature. So it's not lawful. We brought this to light, and we cited in the matter of a several-page resolution documenting whereas, multiple and many cases of abridgments of the law by the governor. And we gave it to the legislature, many discussions. In August, the court under King's Bench has assaulted the legislature. The governor has defied the law. The executive now wants your job. They want to make the law. As a matter of fact, he is. And the court is also making law. They want your job too. Now, the question is, are you going to sit there and allow them to take it and do it? Here's how you can fix it. You do not go and put order and challenge the excesses in the judiciary and the executive branch. Impeachment is one part. A resolution to the court declaring there to be null and void. All they would have done, that would have set in motion a series of actions, and the legislature would have said, we make the law under the Constitution and not you, and we're going to fight it, and we're going to fight for it. The failure for them to do that is what allowed everything else to happen. Had they done that, like some of them wanted to do, but the top leadership were afraid to do, we've never done that before. I said, you've never been assaulted like this before. It's never been like this before. There's a problem. If you don't do this, you as the legislature agree to be politically raped again and again. The legislature has been defanged. The legislature under the Constitution, a lot of people don't know this, if there are three equal branches in government, we in a republic, we say they're equal. But if there's one more equal than others, it's the law. It's the legislature, because until there is a law, there's nothing to execute. There's nothing to enforce, and there's nothing for the court to rule on. The legislature first. The failure of the legislature to lead. through cowardice, to the fact they've never done it before, is what further explanation point on the end of the process and telegraphed to the court and to the governor, we won't stand in your way.
All right.
All right. So
That is the process of what has happened.
go ahead if you have any questions. We need to start taking some questions from the listeners, but we want to, this is what happened before, but now we are faced by the For the People Act and what is going to happen in Congress to implement very similar things that took place into the broad spectrum on the whole country and make it the law of the land for forever. Some people don't understand that the Congress, you're ready. So you want to talk a little bit about this one? Oh my
There
goodness.
it is. That's
Awesome.
the bill.
Yes.
And I'm telling you, Mark, a bill of over 700 pages. There is a lot of corruption.
Yes.
This is what you're talking about.
People out there,
ahead.
Sam, thanks for being ready. And we need to discuss this a little bit more. So the very first question is, many people don't understand that the Congress has the right under the Constitution to actually implement some voting law or election law that will override any state and local stuff. It is part of the institution. Is that right or wrong? What do you think about that?
It's only partially right, but it is partially right.
Yes.
Establishes law that governs federal elections only.
Okay.
They cannot tell the states how they set up their election process for state elections. But when it comes to federal elections, they can have and impose certain uniform laws.
Perfect. And that will affect United States congressmen, United States senators, and the president. Would that be right?
Yes.
And that will change the leadership of the country if they wanted to, right? That will change.
Say that again, because
that will make a real change in how the country will be governed, future administrations and presidents and the elected officials on the federal level, right?
Oh, it could, but see, the federal government, this is one of these little known tricks. The federal government always seems to get it across the country, right?
Yes.
The federal government has no involvement in education, but yet they tell everybody what they have to do relative to education.
Yes.
Now there's a lot of overarching. How do they do that? People wonder, well, how do they do that? It must be the federal government's telling them. No. The states have up their authority in exchange for federal dollars.
Yes.
That's how it works. That's the dirty trick. And so even in this one, on the voting part, the states will give up their authority because they're going to get money from the federal government in order to accomplish what's happening under COVID stuff. You've got federal directives or wish lists that are happening and states are putting in place because there's trillions of dollars of federal money that's out there floating that comes in, and they're like prostitutes. They're willing to take this money and sell their mother down the river. This is how it happens. So yes, Mark.
So before
their
this
jurisdiction is limited, but their money takes it way beyond. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
And so the first part, because people need to understand that it will give the Congress the right to change the federal election for good by implementing this legislation, right? The second part that people have questions about, which is can it pass through the Senate or not? And the question about the filibuster. And for people to understand, if you wanna explain to people what is the filibuster is or not, I can pick it up very quickly to make it as simple as I understand it. In the Senate, for any bill to come to the floor after it passes the House, it will be open for debate. And for the debate to end, they need 60% of agreement on the floor for it to be, ending the debate and put it on to voting. And if it did not get the 60%, it will never go into voting and it will stop in its tracks. But there is multiple remedies in the hands of the Democrats, since they control, or they have 50% plus the vice president. They can change some rules by the nuclear choice, or the mini nuclear choice as well, that they can overcome this hurdle and be able to pass it through the Senate and then get it into to the president's desk, and he can sign it, and it become the law of the land. And we, the people, voice will be gone forever by this bill. And I want to go into this bill and what it says actually in a little bit. But would you agree with what I said about passing through the House and going through the Senate? You are the expert. I would love to hear from you, and I think people would love to hear from you.
Well, no, you really defined that, or defined that. There are what's called rules of the House. So the rules of the Senate, the rules of, and those are procedural rules. How you bring a bill to the floor, how long you can debate on each bill, whether you have a majority or a supermajority vote, or that kind of thing. Those rules of the Senate, because they've prided themselves in being a more deliberate body, what they call themselves, they've prided themselves in having to require more than a majority vote, and so you could 60. But and that has been there just to extend courtesy to the minority, to encourage a more healthy debate, and so you don't have, and to try to avoid ramrodding things through just because you can. That's the consensus part of it. But the nuclear option you talked about is those in charge say, we frankly don't care about being congenial. We don't care about consensus. We just want to change the law. So can they do that? Yes, the answer is they can do that. Would that be, is it unconstitutional? No. But is it unethical? Absolutely. And does it change the level and the flavor of the deliberative process in the House and the Senate? Oh yeah, it does. It makes it far more like a unicameral type affair, like a single party dictatorship. And that is the path that they're on. So yes.
Well,
hopefully that cleared that
if
up
you're going to start depending on their ethics and following the Constitution and to be nice to each other, I think we are setting ourselves to a big failure. Don't you agree? Whatsoever. So going back to
you cannot. Mark. No, you cannot. You count on leadership of the Senate or leadership of the House to follow the Constitution, because they haven't been doing it for a long time.
That's a great statement right there.
Look at the Senate.
Go ahead.
Look at the Senate going on right now. It's not constitutional to try on impeachment cases a private citizen. This is a bill of attainder, what's happening right now. Yet, if you can convince yourself in a position of the Senate or House that for the cause of whatever you determine it to be is more important than the restraints of law of that Constitution that you take your oath to support, if you can set that aside, there is no law, Mark.
Yes.
And that's the problem. Just like in Pennsylvania, the problem was the law needed to be restored because it's lawless. What's happening there now is lawlessness because the Constitution is not governing their actions. So on a scenario, a lot can happen and the checks and balances are out the window. Yeah. That's the danger of where we are right now.
There is a few questions coming from the audience today, and one of them is from Les Brewer. He says, "What about South Dakota law for review of federal laws for constitutionality?" I think that's a great question. You know, I don't know if you're aware of this. Governor Christian Noem is putting a legal team together to see if they can challenge the executive orders and other things. So, you know, do you think states will be able, because you are very well versed in, you know, the separation of the state and the federal, can the states at some point in time be able to part the, you know, and decide not to implement the law if it even passes in the House and the Senate?
Yeah, absolutely. If they're willing to say no to federal money. And this is the problem. Most of the states are dependent to one degree or another on federal dollars. I live in Pennsylvania, has about a $30 billion budget. But if you put in the federal funds, it's closer to $60 billion. So you take in any state, what the number that people will hear as voters, 20 bucks, but what that state is spending is oftentimes twice as much because it's federal dollars. That federal tail of those dollars that wags the entire dog. And anytime a state stands up and says, we will not, they'll get their monies cut. And I haven't known one state yet who's willing to do that. I mean, you have very, very few, maybe a Texas who has their own power grid, maybe a Texas who has their own energy, maybe Texas who, maybe they could, but most other states couldn't. They'd collapse without federal money.
So here is from
by design.
From your own experience in the legislation body in Pennsylvania and being in politics for quite some time, do you think, what is the remedy for this? How can we, the people, try our best to restore our right for a fair election and not get this bill to pass? Because everybody, you know, here is the thing, I've been talking to lots of leaders, especially in the last couple of weeks, and there is many says, oh, it is not going to pass into the Senate, or there is no way you can get this. And actually, some people even don't understand that the Senate and the Congress has the right to change the federal election, the thing that we talked about. So there's a few questions about, can we push on the Democrats, or actually in a wider way, from your opinion, how can we stop this, if there is any way?
Well, now you're getting into a more lengthy thing. There's a couple things. One, how do you stall lawlessness? Now you're going to the root of the problem of how did we get here? How did we get to the point where people put their hand on the Bible, put their other hand in the air, and promise before God that they'll support this document and defend, then walk away and not think anything about it? Okay. At the heart of the matter, Mark, we have a nation that was built on Judeo-Christian principles. As William Penn said right here in Pennsylvania, the 10 commandments of God, he said, and others said, had to be the body of law to which people voluntarily constrain their actions, both the citizen and those in office. And he said very clearly, only restraint that has the power to control the passions of men's hearts and to keep someone stealing from someone else what does not belong to them, or hurting in body or character someone else that's not them. He said that's the only thing that fails to exist. The republic can't survive. Now, these guys knew that. Well, again, a long time ago, threw those 10 commandments out. The moral restraint is out. We said, God is out. We're not right to him. And he stands up and actually talks about God and the judge of the universe, as the Declaration of Independence talks about. They're kind of, you're a nutcase. How can you say the point where most men have no conscience that's functioning? This becomes a matter when you're talking about truth and law and justice and duty and responsibility. All the things that we're talking about, all of these things are all falling into that category. But if you lose your of God, that Declaration said close to the bottom of it, when they appealed to the judge of the universe to hear the rightness of their case, they knew that only they would give an account to somebody, not just a citizen, but to God himself, and that controlled their actions. When you throw that Chinese legal, there's no appeal. And this is the point to which we have gotten now. That being the case, our construct of our republic, we are states first, and then we are a federated state. We are the states gave away certain authority, yielded it to the federal government. But the federal government has over time been stealing money, printing money, stealing it from people, and they have bribed the states, who were far more interested in having money than they were to produce duties of the Constitution. Now, that being the case, there is, in fact, yet a Constitution that's in place in paper. Functioning, the greatest ability within the law. I'm not God aside, but I'm saying within the construct of the law that is there, the state legislators and the state governors, from a human perspective, offer the best hope, because they do have the ability to go to the federal government. Now, they're going to have to engage that fight or give up money or whatever it may be. But when we have, like our legislature in Pennsylvania, that were really brought front and center, and I'm telling you, I know a lot of our guys in Pennsylvania, it's predominantly good guys. I mean, they respect the Constitution, but they wouldn't go forward in this case because they were fearful, because nobody else had done it quite like this before. So people should work with their legislatures. They should work with their governors if they have a good governor. They need to pray for them. They need to visit them. They need to encourage them, which is what we're trying to do here in Pennsylvania, because some of them are getting wakened up and are saying, man, we had no idea. Well, the window is closing for them to be able to rectify what they have created, but they have the power under the Constitution to do so. So I think that needs to be and encouraged in every way possible. In some cases, a lot of these guys need to be re-educated, don't really understand themselves what it's all about, but they're there in position.
If it is for me today, here is what I will, I'm hoping that every elected official, Republican or otherwise, especially Republicans today, would be having town hall meetings in their constituents areas, whether they're states or there's districts across the country, raising awareness about that there is a tsunami that will change our election system forever, that we the people is going to be taken away from us forever, and that we all need to be aware of what's going on and what about this bill and what's going to happen. I'm hoping that people will get together and to try to lobby 1 or 2 Democratic senators from voting for this bill. I think this is something that is an urgent. This is something that defines America in the future. It is of a national security. It is of a national importance. It is one of the most important things, because we are a nation that is started by we the people. And we the people have one thing that we can participate in this governing body in this country, which is voting for our elected officials. And if you take this away from us, then we are no longer we the people, and we no longer America. This is what I'm very passionate about. This is what I'm so angry about our elected officials about. More than I know that people talk about the impeachment and what's going on and so forth in the second impeachment of Donald Trump, which is 100% unconstitutional, and there is so much lacking in the legal representation and so forth. But I think this is the biggest and the most important thing. The Democrats and the left has been very, very smart in distraction. While everybody was distracted into the first impeachment, they already passed this law in Pennsylvania and changed the election of 2020. We should not be distracted today. We should be up in arms, everybody talking about it, whatever platform we have, to explain to the people and to start lobbying and start to making a difference. Do I agree with some of that stuff, or what do you think? Or am I optimistic?
No. I do agree. I do agree with that, Mark. But I would broaden it to those, again, I don't know who's participating in this webinar, but we should not think for a moment that this is a Democrat issue alone. Now, the Democrats in this country, the Democrat Party is the Democrat, they have given themselves over. The platform is clearly a Marxist platform. We know that. So we call them Democrats, but Marxist by ideology. But the problem of it is that we have many, the establishment is what they are, Republicans. Get them now. I mean, own senators from Pennsylvania here. Well, even in private discussions with me, and publicly has been out, hey, I haven't seen one incident of voter fraud in Pennsylvania. And I said, are you crazy? You either, it's not possible. It's not possible that anybody in a sitting position of being a senator or a congressman can stand right now and see no evidence of fraud or tampering. Anybody who says that is a biblical fool or a lie. It's not possible. Because they all know how the system works. Anybody who's been around for a long time, they all know it's not a hidden thing. So it's on one side only, and it only comes down to this, Mark. It's a worldview. I have said this, and maybe it'll help, and maybe it won't here a little bit. But I think that the November 3rd election, as much as we may think of, wasn't a decision Donald Trump or Joe Biden. Now, they were the faces, but it was much deeper. It was a choice for views. It was a choice of a worldview, a generally God-fearing Judeo-Christian worldview that has life is sacred, that God has designed a man and a woman and children to be just that and not any other combination or mutation. That Israel is important, to be favored and protected, that energy is there to be and given by God to be developed, and there are such a thing as borders, because that's why God designed it to be, these kinds of things. But the other, a Joe Biden other, is a globalist that says no boundaries, no sovereign nations, climate change is the biggest problem that we face. We won't tax. We love COVID because it brings everything under the control of the vaccine in a person's arm. They're on that side. It was a worldview, socialism, that view. That's what it was about. And so I encourage, when you know someone who has basically a Judeo-Christian worldview that says, if they favor life, you can probably talk to them. If they believe that there's something right and wrong, they're approachable. But if they're already on the other side, I don't care anything about God, and I think the most important thing is we can kill our babies, which is what this president is all about. That's what he's doing. Then you're not going to get much hope there. I think what has happened under these last 4 years under this president is that some would say it's because of his personality. I think it goes deeper. I think God has been involved in all that has happened. I think people been forced out of the middle. It used to be that you were a politician, you could, and many did. I mean, I never did. It's immoral, but many would go into the front of the Planned Parenthood group and would talk in favorable about, yeah, it's a woman's right to choose. And then they would go over to the pro-life group and say, no, I believe in the sanctity of life.
Yeah.
And they would and they survived, did for a long, saying one thing publicly, and then they would do something else. These last 4 years have forced people off the fence. People are now made up in their minds, it seems, this side or this side, but it's primarily worldview. It's primarily worldview. Is God still in the picture, or is government answer? Is it socialism, or is it free enterprise and capitalism?
Yeah.
Is it Israel, or is it the Palestinians and Iran? I mean, this is really what's happened. That's why most of the independents in the country politically have disappeared. They've gone on one side or the other. So this is what's happened. So for those of us who hold to a Judeo-Christian worldview that says there is God, God created, he had a plan for society, he laid it out, he gave us commands, simple 10 commands to follow, and there is truth, there is justice, and if one believes that, that's where our time ought to be spent, to encourage those people to have courage and to get a backbone and stand in the gap. And there are enough of them there. There are enough of them there, but they're not exercising very much courage now, like most of our folks here in Pennsylvania and many others.
Go ahead.
That's how I would give a broader answer to that.
Yes.
I just wanted to say that you have hit it on the head. And in terms of the solution, I believe we have a two-tiered solution. We have to do what it takes to move the culture back to a Judeo-Christian worldview. But we have to give ourselves, on the other level, on the political level, we have to give ourselves the chance to do that. We have to protect our First Amendment rights, all 5 of them. We have to protect our Second Amendment rights. And we have to move the political levers to protect ourselves. You've given a great opportunity, a great solution to encourage states to recognize and demand their sovereignty, to prevent, and we have to fight HR1 and S1 with everything we have.
So to jump on this, there is a question from Mary Irving. So asking if this bill is already in the Senate, and they say that is a version of it is in the Senate already. So yes, Mary, that is true. And I want to explain exactly what's going on. So we have HR1 and the exact bill in the Senate, it's called S1, and both of them are represented into the House and in the Senate. And a very simple way to do it, to get away or get around the filibuster, is if it was represented in the Senate for the voting from the very beginning and not for debate, and that will go around the filibuster, and it was going to be a simple vote to get it through the Senate. This is how simple it is for this bill, and how close for this bill to become the law of the land and changing the voting system for good. So my question to you, Sam, and you have been in the House in Pennsylvania for 18 years. When issues like this, and every representative from the House and the Senate is fully aware of this bill, why they are not out there speaking up and speaking out about it, and what is the changes going to take place in the country today? Why they are not speaking to their constituents across the country to tell them what's going on, to raise awareness? Because my understanding of things is this: you have to diagnose the problem, you have to be aware of the problem to solve the problem. And it is only us that are talking about it today. There is a very small amount of people that are talking about it in the cross country. Why those elected officials are silent and quiet and completely ignoring it and not getting into the public?
Comes to HR1 or S1, the reason the states are is because most of the legislators, if you take a poll right now, they probably won't even know that the bills are in. They're focused on what's going on in their own state. They're talking about the bills that they're sponsoring. They're thinking about what they're doing. Most of them probably don't even know that HR 1 is HR 1. And whenever, and again, for those who are listening, whenever you have a low numbered bill, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, they are there, and that signifies it is greatest importance. So there will be quick action on HR 1 and Senate Bill 1, because that's why it got that number. That means it has top priority ideologically, politically, by the leadership of the House and the Senate. So it's going to get action. It's going to get quick. Now, it's interesting. It's interesting that in Pennsylvania, I'm scrolling through today, looking at a number of bills. There are a lot of bills that are in already this new session that deal with mail-in ballots. Some of them, I'm looking at a lot of them were Democrat bills. I did not open up to read them, but if they're choosing to changes, is probably they're going to want to do something on mail-in ballots because they know people is upset. Now, the question is, what are they going to do? I don't know, but I guess is you have a lot of mail-in ballot dealing piece of legislation, probably in every
state,
because it's been an issue everywhere. Question is, where is it going? I don't know what they're attempting to do, but politically they can't do nothing.
See the competing.
So they're going, and that comes to do you something because it's politically correct, or you want to do something because it's substantive. So that's the key.
So, see, the problem is I met with many of the elected officials in our state and others, and some of them, they think, okay, well, it is the mail-in ballots that changed the elections in 2020. So what we need to do is to try to take advantage of that kind of method in the election in the future. And that's not going to happen. This is a very naive idea of how this is going to work, because it is not put in together to create another venue for people to vote. It's actually created to create phantom votes and other ways. It's going to be like a tipping the scale at any election and so forth. And it depends on one state or another from that perspective. So awareness is crucial, and understanding the matter is very important, don't you think?
Well, it is, but there has to be a recognition. I mean, some legislature, some court has to provide an opportunity for the presentation of evidence about how the whole process was abused. See, that's the illusion part that up to this point, there has not been an official judicial or an official legislative action that's actually given the opportunity in Pennsylvania to actually hear the evidence, present something about it. Now, here in Pennsylvania and Arizona, they'd had some hearings, and they were really positive because a lot of people listened and they saw these people report and testify. But those were just committees. Those were committees that were put together to provide an opportunity, some presentation, but it never went anywhere. It wasn't, they didn't have power to subpoena. It was a
Two questions.
But it wasn't an official. So at this point, even the senators, like the one from here in Pennsylvania, say, well, I never saw anything. I mean, my own senator here told me, he said, Sam, he said, I don't see any evidence. He said, I said, how can you say that? He said, the proof of it is that none of the courts determined that there was any reason for them to give a hearing. I said, you think that by the fact that the court did not provide an opportunity meant there was no evidence? Again, are you crazy? So that's what we're lacking. We need a forum. The legislature still can. Some of these states that where the issues were there, they need to convene something officially with the legislature and empower it with the ability to make the findings and the results of them official. Then something could be done and be pushed back. But right now, I don't know of any that's taken place. It needs to. It
Right.
needs to.
Yes. We have a couple of questions. Joan asks if it's possible to impeach senators, legislatures, and so forth for violating their oath of office by changing the laws by unconstitutional means, and should this be done? It's a good question, by the way. It is a question while you're thinking that has been asked in Nebraska of our senior senator.
Yes.
And we've heard that the answer is no, but it's a question we need to consider.
I don't know that it's ever been done. Can members of the legislature be removed? Well, some have been, but you have to commit a felony or something of that type. The impeachment proceedings in our Constitution are from the legislature to someone in another branch. I mean, a legislature can censor one of its own members, but they don't have the ability to remove a member because it's the voters who put them in place, or because and so they were elected for their terms. I don't think that it can be done.
All right.
Of the legislature, of the member of the legislature.
John points out that voter ID is at the core of these voting issues. If we have a strong voter ID law, will everything else flow from that? Should
Yes.
that be the top priority in state legislatures?
Well, I tell you, that's a great question, and I'll share something with you that maybe is not known. Everybody, you familiar with the Real ID?
Yes.
The Real ID Act was put in after 9/11, and it began to happen. I opposed it vigorously when I was in the House here in Pennsylvania, because of what it would do, violate lots of rights. But you believe it or not, right now, under federal law, all of the states have been certified as having the Real ID law put into effect. And in fact, part of the reason for the Real ID was to guarantee a valid proof of who a person was. That was the idea behind it. Homeland Security and other departments have certified that all of the states have it in place. Federal law that actually voting says that the states, in order to comply with federal law, if they are certified under Real ID, have to prove that the Real ID was used to verify the people who voted. And here's another interesting point. As a part of the federal law, the Real ID will be certified by a state unless that state actually, that person in that picture, and compares it to that person's birth certificate. That's the law. No state has done that. No state has done that. So would an ID make a difference? No, because the law is in place. All of the states violated it because none of them have taken it back and confirmed it to the birth certificate. The federal government knows that they have not done it. And that was a federal law governing elections. So the federal government doesn't care if you violate certain laws, as long as you don't violate the ones that mean something to them. That's what it comes down to. Now, theoretically, if you had, which has been the whole basis for voting anyways, I mean, the Pennsylvania Constitution, all of them, it assumes that the person who comes is the person who they say they are, which that's doubly why mail-in ballots going to people who are, you know what, I want to, back in October, I want to see if I have it in front of me here. Back in October, I had on my radio program a lead counsel from, boy, where is it? That's weird. I don't know where to put it. Here.
This can't
From
possibly be messier than ours is.
here it is. I had Bob Oyenby, Bopper, and he is senior director, senior attorney of Judicial Watch. And I had him on the program. Now, this was in October the 8th. They had filed in Pennsylvania against a number of counties, and because they had not purged their list. All states, according to federal law, have to regularly, every so often, go through and purge their list to make sure that dead people are on the list and that people who moved are not on the list. In California, last year as an example, LA County, they had 5 million active registrations, but 1.6 million of them belong to people who had moved out of state. They weren't even there. And these people were on the roll. Same thing in Pennsylvania. They filed here in multiple counties. And some of them agreed. They hadn't done anything. They hadn't purged.
But see, the mail-in ballots that we're talking about, when they send it, are you okay? Can you hear me okay?
Nope, we just lost it.
I can confirm that they did. And the federal court never did anything about it. So here it is. In every state, you've got tens of thousands, millions of people on the rolls that are dead or have moved, known by law. Judicial challenged them in many states, caused some changes to be made. But I went back and I asked them at that point, even like in California with the 1.6 million in a county that were dead or moved, do you know that they actually purged the rolls? I mean, they were told to, but does any really know if they did? No, they don't know.
That's crazy.
So back to your question. Would another federal law that requires a voter ID that's good to work, would that make a difference? It hasn't yet.
All right, thank you.
One thing actually I want to add very quickly is, in the new HR1, they're going to go and it allows without any restrictions to go into different lists to reach out to people and send them mail-in ballots without verification of if they're dead or alive, or they have moved, or if they are eligible to vote or not. And depending on just returning the envelope back by whoever is receiving it and signing, yes, I agree. So if you send it to John and Mark sign it, who cares? Nobody cares. We're going to have just another person to vote. And this is the seriousness of this HR1 and S1. Go ahead and there's any more questions.
We've had a couple of questions from Mary and Mary relating to the impeachment. Some say it is constitutional. Mark Levin, for instance, will argue that there is no way that the lawyer that stated that opinion had to rewrite it, essentially, so that they can say it is constitutional. Another Mary asked, is participating in the former President Trump's pseudo impeachment unconstitutional, and is it punishable just for somebody that participates in it? Your comments?
Like it disqualifies the senators who are participating and voting for it.
You were breaking up. I didn't get the main part of what was legal. What was the question? I didn't get that.
There are those that argue that the impeachment is constitutional for several reasons. There are others that argue against that.
Yeah, I missed it. I missed it again. I'm sorry. What is constitutional or what's not? I missed that.
The impeachment of the president. The conviction, the Senate trial, is that constitutional?
Okay. The answer is no, it really is not under any consent. The Fifth Amendment, the fact that you are trying, citizens cannot be impeached. Citizens cannot be impeached, cannot be convicted on an impeachment. He's a citizen now. If he was a president, still in office, then that would be a different matter. But he's a citizen now.
Yes.
The impeachment part they've already done. So no, that's now they're going to come up. I'm sure tomorrow the defense is going to begin making presentation, and some thinking that they're going to try and hinge what the president on his First Amendment right, that he had an ability to speak what he did, and he did not incite. They're trying to say that he did incite. Okay, all right, this is going to have to make a determination on that. But when you bring a citizen, when you bring somebody before the Senate as a citizen, which is what they're doing, is a bill of attainder.
Well, no,
That is prohibited.
the very essence of the impeachment is to protect the office of the presidency from a crook. And Trump is no crook. This is number one. Number two is he's not in office. You are not protecting anything. And by their own admission, they are putting the impeachment together to bar Trump from running for office in the future. And that by itself is a violation of what the impeachment is all about. So you are impeaching unconstitutionally a United States citizen
Just
and
dropped out. Just dropped out.
and barring him from running for office in the future. That is a violation beyond anything. But see, this is how they do business. They don't care. They cross the line. They test everything. So we cannot be trusting them of how they can change the voting system and everything else.
No, and that's what we were all the way through. When you set aside your constitutional oath because you have set aside the fact that you have to give an account to God sometime, you have no right. That is called lawlessness, even though you have an appearance of law, because a body of people sitting together operating according to some rules, they're not being guided by the law right now. And that's why one, I say, should think that when you hear a president say what he's going to do, or I don't want to bring this up, but if you haven't seen it, ladies and gentlemen, you need to bring this up. Secular Democrats of America. This was a letter that was sent to Kamala Harris and Joe Biden. This is the roadmap that is being followed. This is a complete purging of everything that is constitutional in the country, legislation, executive orders, all of that. We must not think that people will automatically be restrained and cease to vote for things that we have always historically felt to be wrong, immoral, unconstitutional, or unpatriotic. When you're not governed, as I said earlier, William Penn, go back to the founder, if we're not governed by the rule of God, we will be governed by the sword.
Amen. So,
and that handed government. So our involvement must be in prayer for those who are in positions of authority, because God's told us to do that. We need to reach out to those who are in office. We have a duty to do that. Let them know you're praying for them. Don't go in and just hit them over the head. Even the
do we lose you again?
of who God is and accountability. They need to be brought along, encouraged and taught, and I hope they are quick learners. I hope they are quick learners.
I want to ask you from your perspective, and I do, appreciate your leadership, and you're running, your organization. Can you tell us a little bit about your platform and your organization right now? And also from a biblical perspective, let's look at the biblical worldview instead of all of those views that's going on. How do you see things going on, and how do things things are unfold. So tell us about your platform and tell us about, from a biblical Christian perspective, how do you see things nowadays?
Well, thanks, Mark. The American Pastors Network is a pastor-led organization. We have an emphasis on the pulpit, but we have an emphasis, and so we're trying to start chapters of pastors in multiple states. But we also have a platform of radio and television. So we're on television, a 30-minute weekly program, Stand in the Gap. You could probably pick it up in many places. 3 radio programs, a daily hour program called Stand in the Gap Today. That's where I've interviewed Mark numbers of times. I've interviewed Mark, Dr. Christian, on our TV program multiple times. So he's been on those platforms, but we're reaching hundreds of thousands of people today, 400 some on the daily. But take headline and then analyze it from a biblical and constitutional perspective. And that is to help people who have a fear of God, patriotic, believe in truth, to know how to think and decipher what's happening of deception. Now, where do I think things are going as a nation? And I'll speak biblically here. God gave us a nation and raised up a nation that has been unique around the world. We started out, we were a Christian nation with a foundation. But are we a Christian nation today? The answer is absolutely not. We are not functioning at all like a Christian nation. But foundation is very biblical. The Constitution is 100% biblically based principally. So that is we have a vestige left over. A lot of people in the country still believe in God, still believe in truth, but those numbers are shrinking. On the serious side of the equation, according to George Barna, some of you would recognize him, I'm on a program regularly, would say that right now, millennials and generations, about 2 to 3% only have a biblical worldview. Now, biblical worldview, simple terms, God is, God created, sin came into the world precipitated by a real live devil, but God loved the world, promised redemption through his son, Jesus Christ, and those who believe in that can be restored, reconciled, redeemed, and restored. Now that's the short piece of what a biblical worldview is. But out of that is why life is important. Life is property is sacred. And all that's in our Constitution comes out of that biblical worldview. Our challenge today, and I don't know who's listening, but if you are my age, I'm in my 60s, those who are in their 50s and on up, those who have a more ingrained understanding of what a republic was. We can remember what this country was at one point, and we can more articulate what right and wrong is. We have an entire generation that's come behind us who does not know what that is. You've got an entire generation of kids coming up right now who think that masking is normal. Life is different. And so for a group, a generation that's coming up, they don't automatically know what good is. They have a sense of what they think good is, but not as defined what God says good is or evil is. Or so that's part of our challenge. And I would just, for this, for those of you who are listening, if you're a grandparent, you may have children that maybe they didn't follow in your path. I really across the country where children have gone off. Be grandchildren, impart the ways of God and the fear of God and the basic truths to your grandchildren. They'll listen to you. If God so gives us time, I don't know. I think he's return us soon, frankly, but we are to occupy till he comes. So it means we think immediately, we occupy with fervency where we are, we plan generationally, but I'm also anticipating I'm looking for the Lord's return. Now that's how I'm looking at where things are. We have been given a lot's been taken away, but I'd say a lot more has been given than has been taken away at this point. All of us who know what the truth is, we say at the end of the close of all of our programs, know the truth, pursue the truth, embrace truth, and then stand in the gap for truth.
Amen.
Thank you,
Thanks.
Honorable Mr. Rohr. What a concise encapsulation of the real issue of our day, of any day across the world, especially in our country, which is the shining light on the hill. At least it was, and perhaps our duty is to help restore it. Thank you so much. Mark, any last words?
No, I think we need to have you over here in Omaha, so to speak, and we have a better, communication, and we'll make this happen very soon, and we'll try to raise awareness about your radio as well and your TV, because people need to listen to you every day.
Amen.
Thank you, Mark. God bless both of you, and thank for you guys standing in the gap. It's what it takes. And again, one other thing before I go, all of you may be listening. I don't know. I mean, we all have a tendency, and that we have a tendency to think that, well, you know what? I'm just one person. What can I do? I'm in Pennsylvania. I can't control what happens in California or in Nebraska, but God has you people there in Nebraska. I'm in Pennsylvania. We all have a circle of people that we contact. Some have a bigger platform than others, but we all have people that nobody else can contact. Let's assume responsibility for the ones we have, the ones we contact. That if all people do that, then God can take and do great things. God will never hold us accountable for the results, but he will hold us accountable for how we embrace the truth, communicate the truth, and live the truth. The results are up to God. That takes a big burden off of all of us when we consider that. And that's where I would leave it in my final words on that. The results up to God, but be faithful where you are.
Thank you so much. Global Faith's next monthly meeting will be on the fourth Thursday, the 25th of this month. We will have 2 meetings as we have in the past. We will have an 11:30 meeting at the Pizza Ranch in Lincoln and a 5:30 meeting at the Garden Cafe in Omaha. Programs starting at noon and 6, respectively. You may go to our website, globalfaith.org, to register for these events. We will have more, and we will have Sam back. What a wonderful discussion. You may also donate at globalfaith.org and support us. We are available on facebook.com and /globalfaith.org, and on Twitter at the Apostate One. We will be investigating free speech social media in the future too. The Lord, we send you off tonight with a blessing. The Lord bless you and keep you. The Lord make his face to shine upon you, and the Lord give you peace. Happy Valentine's Day. God bless everybody.
Thank you.